interviewing, if that's what I call it, a woman who's standing as a candidate, and her name is
Mary Venturini.
And the area, district, whatever it is, where are you standing?
I am standing in District 3, and that is Trinity, St John and St Lawrence.
It's one of these strange amalgam districts of, it's very confusing. Who you'll be representing when you get elected. Will you be representing one parish or another parish, or all three parishes, or beyond that? What's your view?
Well, it'll be all three parishes, and that's the exciting thing about it. I come from St John's, that's where my roots are in St John's. I know Trinity pretty well. St Lawrence I'm getting to know now, and I'm finding it really, really interesting. I've had to look at the maps to find out where the borders are. I've had to change my mind about people who I thought were in one parish, but they're not, they're in another parish. And I really find this exciting. It's giving a new dimension to politics. That's what I'm trying to do.
We hope it will. You're an independent. Now, that is a good thing in some ways, but it's rather difficult in other ways. In other words, how can you, a single representative, have a whole island manifesto? You can't do it, can you?
It's quite difficult, and it's been difficult from the start, because if you're an independent, your nomination process is much more difficult than if you're with a group or a candidate. You're out there on your own, and you've got to find your way through. There's nobody there to guide you. Coming to it for the first time also, I find it's quite difficult, but I'm really enjoying it, because it's a challenge to find your way around, to find your way through the systems, what's required, the hustings and everything. Now, on an island-wide basis, obviously, your ideas are slightly different from what they are on a parish basis, but I find this also quite challenging and exciting, because you are representing three parishes, but on island-wide problems.
And of course they are country parishes, for want of a better expression. And there is an island divide which people are beginning to recognise between the country and the town. And the circumstances in town are different. So are you being forced to have different policies for town and country?
Well, the one overriding problem, of course, applies to both St Helier and to the country, and that is housing.
Right.
That is universal throughout the island. Universal throughout the island is a silly expression, but it is. Wherever you are, this is the major problem, I would think. The next problem, but equal to it, is healthcare, and that is, again, a problem in St Helier as it is out in the parishes. So there are common denominators.
Yes, there are. This is inevitably a hospital will serve the whole island, so it can't be a parochial issue for St Helier, can it? So there has to be input from the parishes in the countryside, constables or deputies, wherever they might be. But if it's not in their manifesto, the public don't know what their policy is going to be. So what do you do about it? How do you tell people, I'm in favour of the hospital, I'm in favour of not having the hospital built there, I'd like the hospital to be in St Mary? How do you accommodate these sorts of different views?
Well, it is very difficult to get the message out. It is particularly difficult as we don't get a lot of information. Now, the government thinks that they've been pumping out a lot of information about the new hospital planned for Overdale, but in actual fact, we still don't even know the number of beds that they're going to be in the hospital.
Right.
The figures have gone from something like 450 down to 175.
Exactly.
They didn't at one stage even know whether they were compulsory purchasing 13 buildings or 14. I think that is just not good enough. And I wonder whether they themselves know. They're pushing out so many different answers to our questions that sometimes I think, well, probably they don't even know.
As an observer, I do wonder who's pushing the scheme. Obviously somebody wants it built when they've chosen the site, they want it built there, but I don't think they're particularly keen on it. They just want to build this enormous structure because, it's as though money is no object. You can have to spend as much as you like, so it seems.
Well, the money is no object. I mean, it's 800 million.
That's right.
What does that mean to the ordinary person? 800 million and rising, because interest rates are going up now, as we know, and it's not going to stop there. It's going to go up and up and up. And this enormous hospital is not fit for purpose anyway. It's not fit for the site that they have chosen. I don't discuss the site. I think Overdale has been a hospital site for 100 years. It could be a fantastic site for the right sort of hospital, the right sort of design. But what they've done is a huge, great hospital that is, if you look at it, it's cutting into the hill. It is not using the site properly. The site is like an amphitheatre. It's a beautiful site. If they had managed to get the right design, that could have been a wonderful place for a hospital. But they have decided that they want a great, big, huge, great white elephant on the top of a hill.
Yes, of course. I mean, in some ways, it's a little bit like Fort Regent. They had potential there for a wonderful complex of various activities. They never quite rose to the occasion. They never actually finished the scheme, and they didn't have the designers with the sufficient talent to make something really wonderful of it. They seem to, I don't know. I mean, the one little, ironically, not far from where the hospital, the one little building which is a little architectural gem, they're going to demolish the Fregat Cafe, which has won awards all around the world, but they're going to demolish that.
Yes.
You see, it's a very, I mean, I'm an ex-building designer, so I'm sympathetic for anybody who tries to produce a nice building. And well, it isn't just about appearance, you were saying, it's about function. Number of beds, obviously it's integral. And we've never been made quite clear how many are private beds. So, because that was always something, a hint that this could be making money for Jersey, because you could have upmarket private hospital treatment, but it's gone very quiet on that front.
It's gone very quiet on all sorts of things. For instance, accommodation for staff.
Right.
That was in the original plan. It's disappeared.
Yeah.
We have a knowledge centre, which sounds wonderful, but what's going to go into it? We have a 4-storey car park. Well, we know that a lot of cars are going to go into it, just because the situation with cars is as it is in this island. That, of course, is another.
What happens next with the Friends of the New Hospital? What you can't give secrets away what they're planning, but it hasn't folded. It's still a campaign which is ongoing.
Well, it's still a campaign because we still have the problem of the Jersey care model as well.
Right.
The two should have run together. They're not running together. The hospital is designed for the Jersey care model to work. The Jersey care model is...
Well, the Jersey care model has been kicked around, and I'm looking at searching my bag. I did a little documentary on it, 2010 or 2012, and we interviewed lots of people. But I don't hear that scheme that was being talked about then. There was little clinics in the parishes, and doctors, surgeons were going to do all sorts of things. Chemists were going to do advising on. There was a whole. Where's it all gone?
Well, that's what we keep asking. But 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were about 3 or 4 meetings for the public on the Jersey care model.
I went along. I filmed it.
And you discovered that we weren't allowed to ask questions.
Exactly.
And that happened 3 times.
Yes.
And it happened yet again when we were told that we were able to ask questions online.
Right.
And again, it just didn't work. And we don't have the information, that's the problem. What we do know now that is that the states are going to be relying on charities to make this function. Well, that's very nice, but it looks to me as though the states are farming out onto the charities, which work wonderfully well.
That's right.
Now they're going to have probably a much bigger workload than they had before.
It's one of my fears, because since they've been doing the what they call it, the third sector or something, they dream up a special name for it to try and sell it to the public. It is good to involve charities, but of course it means the charities themselves, 9 times out of 10, have got to go into a commitment. So they have to have a contract. Absolutely. And if they have a contract, they have to have a contract with their employees if they employ anybody. Yeah. And so it goes on. So you finish up with lots of little Quango type businesses. And it destroys the whole ethic of charity.
Of the charity.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things that I discovered, talking to some of the charities afterwards, was that they do not have what the States has, and that is an employment issue.
Right.
What they're finding is that a lot of people want to work for them.
Right.
Where are they coming from? They're coming from the state sector, because the people who are employed by the states are fed up with the conditions of work, etc., etc. They're going to the charities with this enormous dedication. The charities would love to employ them, but they can't, because where's the money coming from?
That's
They
right.
do not
That's
even know how they're going to get, how the funding is going to function. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, initially they were employing charities on a one-year contract, which meant that they couldn't plan for the future. The contract would take people on in the 12 months' time and say, sorry, we can't employ you anymore, you can't be with all. Anyway, beyond the hospital, beyond the care system, in the parish, the country parishes, which is where you're standing, what are the big issues?
I would say that the environment is an issue,
Right.
agriculture is an issue, traffic is an issue, public transport is an issue. Those are the issues that I have found. Of course, housing, which I mentioned before, is always an
It
issue.
applies everywhere.
Yeah.
The agriculture, which is again one of those strange things, in my view, it's a dying activity. It cannot continue. It's very pretty, it's nice somebody keeps the grass cut, the cows or whoever's out there cutting the grass. But to me, I keep saying, and everybody hates me for saying it, it's just a stage set. It's just something to make the countryside look pretty, so the people who have the privilege of living in the countryside have got pretty views. I live on the coast, I've got a wonderful sea view, so it isn't the same problem. But in the countryside, somebody has to maintain the land.
I think you're being controversial about that, deliberately controversial. I would say that where I live, it's absolutely vital. I am surrounded by fields with potatoes, basically. This time of year, or a bit earlier, I have tractors going up and down the road constantly. Along the north road, there are tractors going at high speeds constantly. Later on, there are workers, rather like a Blampied picture, I always think, upturned in the fields, digging up whatever it is they're digging up, or collecting it is, whatever it is. I wouldn't say it's dying at all.
Well, the biggest grower of vegetables has just thrown in the towel because he says it's not a going concern.
Well, that's because the UK companies have come in.
Well, whatever the reason is, it's a reality, isn't it?
That is a reality, but we're still planting, and we still have herds of cattle, and lots of herds of cattle. I think it's changing. It's got to change. It can't be the intensive farming that it has been, and I think that is going to present a long-term problem.
Do you think the farmers are pulling their weight on obviously the organics has got a very small presence of organic farming here. Do you think the farmers have really grasped that nettle about not polluting?
I don't think they have. No, I don't. I mean, the fertilisers are going down on the fields, they're being sprayed. No, I don't think they have. But I don't know how, if I were a farmer, I don't know how I would do it, to be honest.
At the last planning, the mini planning island plan that was produced, landowners, they weren't necessarily farmers, were queuing up to have their land rezoned for housing. Development. Because obviously you can become an instant millionaire if you're not already one.
Yes.
You could become, so that's very tempting, isn't it?
It is tempting, but if you look out at St John's, if you look out along the north coast, it's still being farmed pretty intensively.
Right.
I mean, there are fields being cultivated everywhere. It is unusual to see a completely uncultivated field. And I sort of think it might even be good to have uncultivated fields, because when you get uncultivated fields, you get an incredible growth of things like trees and wildlife. And I sort of wish that maybe the farmers could perhaps go over to a more sympathetic form of farming.
To keep their precious cows now, they have had subsidies to feed them in the winter. They didn't have enough food. So even cows, they may look very pretty, but they do cost quite a lot to keep. So the price of milk has just gone up yet again. There are only 2,500 milking cows in Jersey. So they want more and more milk to be produced by those cows, which is rather an aspect of husbandry which I don't find personally very attractive. I mean, they are small animals in the cow world, and I just wonder, do you look at that side of it, whether it is an activity we want to promote from the cruelty point of view?
Well, I have heard some stories about how cows are being treated at the moment. I do find that they're rather strange. I would like them out on the fields chewing the cud with the bull tethered as it used to be long ago, but
Right.
this clearly is not going to happen any longer. So we are going to have to rethink farming, Jersey farming. However, I would hate to see it decline completely and utterly as an industry. I think food, basic food, is extremely important, and it's going to become more and more important. Good food. And
Can you accept that farming can include things like cannabis, hemp plants? Can you accept that is genuine farming in the Jersey context?
That is a very difficult question, and I think that probably I will say yes.
You go.
I think
And
so.
tea?
Tea, I don't know enough about tea. I always thought it had to grow in a completely different environment, on a hill with good drainage. I haven't been to see one of the tea farms. I don't know. I've no idea.
Because somebody has got to get to grips with farming. I mean, the number of farmers, unfortunately, we just lost a farmer who was actively a constable. So Sadie died. So one of the very few farmers, active farmers in the States. But of course, they've diminished in numbers because farming has diminished. When I was in Guernsey a few years ago, and the farmer there I was talking to, he had dairy cattle. He said nobody represents them in the States. Now, somebody has to, don't they? Somebody has to represent all these groups.
Yes.
Tourism.
Well, tourism is another case in point. I mean, of the two great industries that there used to be, agriculture and tourism, both are in difficulty. I think tourism has more of a potential future than agriculture, unless agriculture changes enormously. I do think that tourism will always have a future in Jersey. I mean, Jersey is such a magnificent island. It is so beautiful, it has so much to offer, and I always think that Jersey could make much more of itself, especially in Europe, as a magnificent tourist place. I mean, you've got the archaeology, you've got the sea, you've got the sports, I'm hoping that there will be more art and culture, which I think there is. There are already signs of that. I wouldn't worry about Jersey as a tourist attraction. I mean, it just almost sells itself. I think the problem
If you can get here, you might have to swim here soon.
I was going to say, provided that you can get here from France, which is very difficult, or even from Europe. I mean, you just hear tales of...
And it's not just about a boat or a plane anymore, it's about the regulations for travelling from one territory post-Brexit.
Oh, post-Brexit, but post-COVID was the worst.
Right.
I mean, all the certificates that you have to get in and out of the island, and they were changing every day, and it was an absolute nightmare. Thank goodness that is now over.
Is it?
Certainly between Jersey and the UK. It's not between the UK and other parts of the world.
Well, they thought it was over between Britain and Ireland, but they still seem to be threatening revolution over there, don't they?
Well, I think that's a completely different question.
Yeah. Well, it's the common travel area, which sounds nice, but once you're in that area, you know...
Well, it's more difficult to travel with a British passport these days, that's for sure. Or more, it's not more difficult to travel, it's more difficult to get work.
You see, we're dwelling on these wide-ranging things, but all as an independent states member. I mean, you have to choose, I suggest. I mean, the trouble is, the electorate wants you to have an answer for everything. You can't have an answer for everything. Because they'll pop up, you go to an audience, there's 100 people and they'll have 100 different questions about all ranges. It's not possible. But I'm surprised that more of the environmentalist lobby haven't joined together as an environmentalist group. I'm surprised.
Well,
did you consider that, joining with others?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because politically, Green parties, have not been successful wherever you like to look at them. Germany, I think, has probably been the most successful, but they haven't been successful in other countries. They're sort of ghettoized, or they can't get their message across. or they become rebellious organisations, one thing or another. I don't know what it is about environmentalists, but they're not very good politicians, I would say.
Well, I noticed in your manifesto, which I've read, you don't very often use the word I, you use the word we.
Yes.
Because we will do this, we should do this.
Yes.
Rather sort of offloading the responsibility onto somebody else. Somebody else is going, you know the problem. I say, I've identified the problem. You say that you've identified the problem. I think it's housing or something specific. But you don't know the answer. Doesn't the public want you to have an answer? It may be totally unrealistic, but of course, if you have an answer for all these problems.
Do you know, I'm very proud that you've said that I put we throughout my manifesto.
Right.
I hadn't actually noticed it,
Right.
but what I do feel, and it's one of the reasons why I'm standing, a democracy is not something that you cast a vote once in 4 years and then you go away and go to sleep and you let your people who are governing get on with you. It has got to be a constant interchange with the voters. Now you're shaking your head and
Well, because I know that there are so few people who even vote.
I know, which is one of the reasons why I'm standing, is that I feel that if democracy is going to survive, it is not just our vote to delegate to people to get on with it. It is something that has got to be renewed all the time, and this is community involvement. And I have found that whenever I go out, as I did with the walks at Overdale about the hospital, I got a huge community involvement.
Right.
I got a huge discussion going. I got a huge dialogue going amongst ourselves. Where the divide was between ourselves and the politicians. And this is something that I really would very much like to break down.
In the distant years, you've been in Jersey most of your life, as far as I can imagine. But did you, you've obviously voted before.
Oh yes.
How do you interpret what the people you voted for, have they done anything? The people you trusted in the past?
Oh yes.
Have
I
they?
mean, yes, it comes and goes, doesn't it? It's swings and roundabouts. It's not all good. It's not all bad. I think at the moment it's quite bad. in other places it's come back again. But I do feel that we, the electorate, and I'm saying we again, and I'm putting myself on the side of the electorate rather than of the politicians, we do tend to stand back at the end of elections and say, oh, well, yeah, they've won, and we're either happy or we criticise them. But we don't then get involved again in the process.
Unless somebody's trying to build a stupid hospital in a stupid location.
Well, that's activism, isn't it?
And the last comparable one was, I think, Plymouth, the piece of
Yes,
land in Plymouth,
again,
you see.
yes.
And they are issues, they've got a very large environmental aspect to them, haven't they, these sort of issues?
Well, the hospital is more than that. The hospital is destruction of a community, basically, although our government wouldn't like to look at it like that, but there's a destruction that's going to go on at the top
We've
of
gone past 20 minutes.
Oh,
now,
for
that's
goodness sakes.
So I'm afraid the public will have fallen asleep.
They've fallen asleep by now.
I'm afraid we must stop.
Good,
but
okay.
I shall watch your progress with interest. I might try and get, tonight you've got a meeting.
Yeah.
At Hustings.
Yeah, nobody knows about it though.
It's a secret one.
Yeah, well no, of course it's not secret, but
Well,
they've forgotten to communicate
The
it.
one I went to St Saviour last night, they said you can't come in, this is a parish private meeting.
Well, that's ridiculous.
That's what they were trying to say, but they had to relent. They consulted some wise person and they let us in.
Oh, we know that ours is public, but the public doesn't know that it exists.
Because I don't know how if the 3 members of the public who turn up, one for each parish, that will come up to your meeting, they'll find you somehow. They have to be of the parish to ask questions. This is another thing which I find a little bit frightening, because these deputies like yourself, you'll be dealing with all issues, all island issues. You won't be just a little parish deputy.
No,
and
but
you
that's
straight
good.
away, you've got 3 parishes straight away.
That's good.
Well, it could be good.
It will be good.